In this section, we're going to start to take a look at Node.js. So what's Node all about? Well, up to this point in this course, we've been running code exclusively inside of our browser. In other words, we created a HTML file, we linked a JavaScript file to it, and then we loaded both up inside the browser, and the browser executed our JavaScript code. When we start to run code with Node.js, we're going to instead run code directly on our machine or our computer without any browser being involved. Understanding the differences between running code with Node.js and the browser is easiest if we do a direct compare and contrast. So let's think about some of the differences between running JavaScript in the browser and running JavaScript with Node. So first off, like we just mentioned, when we run JavaScript in the browser, we're adding script tags to an HTML document. That causes the browser to fetch that JavaScript file and execute all the code inside of it. When we start to make use of Node, however, we're going to use a program called the Node CLI, or command line interface, to take in a JavaScript file and run all the code inside. When we run JavaScript in the browser, we get access to the DOM, so that's all of our typical HTML stuff that we've discussed, and we get access to a lot of related objects to that, such as the window object. It's a global object that has a lot of helpful methods on it. When we run JavaScript with Node, however, there is no DOM. So when we use Node, we're not trying to manipulate a DOM, we're not messing around with HTML or anything like that. In the browser, we can load up many different files, and code in between those different files can reference variables or functions or objects defined in other files very easily. And that's pretty much an automatic process. We can have one file with a reference to code that has been written inside of another file, and there's not a lot of direct setup that we have to do to make that relationship work. However, in Node, this is a very different system. So if we start to have multiple different files with Node, we have to treat each different file as its own separate world, or its own separate kind of silo. In other words, all the different variables, functions, and objects we define inside of a file with Node.js are isolated to that single file. And if we want to share that code with another file, we have to go through a very manual and distinct process. Finally, when we run JavaScript in the browser, we always include libraries by adding in script tags. And do keep in mind that there are some more complicated solutions for getting libraries included into a browser-based project. And we're going to discuss those later, but for right now, we're really just thinking about including libraries through the use of script tags. When we move over to Node, however, we get a first-class package management system called NPM, or the Node Package Manager. NPM is a tool that we can use to very easily add in libraries or dependencies that we want to use in a project. And so when we start to make use of Node, we start to make use of a lot of other libraries very quickly. And so this is where it starts to become important to understand how some other libraries work and some common libraries in the JavaScript ecosystem. All right, before we make use of Node, we do have to make sure that it is installed on our local system. Now, it is entirely possible that you have already installed Node, and you might have already done it earlier inside this course. You don't have to do this install if you already have Node installed. If you're not sure if you do, you can change over to your terminal very quickly and run Node. If you see something like this appear, that means you have Node installed. But if you see something that says command node not found or something like that, that means that you have to go through the installation process. By the way, once you get to this point, you can exit out by pressing Ctrl-C. So if you got an error, you need to go through the download and setup process very quickly. This is a really fast thing to do, so I'll walk you through it right now. I'm going to copy that link and open it up inside of a new browser tab. Once over here, we'll scroll down just a little bit, and we can find the Windows installer, Mac OS, or if you are running a Linux distribution, you can download the binaries right here, or use a Linux package manager to download and install Node automatically. At any rate, go ahead and grab the appropriate installer, download it, and run it. Once you install Node, you should be able to go back over to your terminal, restart your terminal, so make sure you restart it. I'm not going to show restarting my terminal, but do make sure you restart yours, and then try to run Node. And once again, you should see something like that appear. Okay, so now that we've got Node up and running, and we've discussed some of the very small differences, let's take a quick pause right here. When we come back in the next video, we're going to start to play around with Node and write some JavaScript that's going to run outside of our browser.